Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, we are going to discuss dynamics of rural India. We will try to understand the development in the rural India, and in today's lecture we will precisely try to understand the analysis of state initiative. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Dr. G.N. Trivedi. He is an academician and teaches political science in University of Delhi, and presently associate professor in Motilal Nehru College South Campus. And Dr. Trivedi is a fellow of DCRC and has taken a number of projects from UGC, principal investigator of major research project of UGC. And Dr. Trivedi has also presented a number of papers in national, international seminars. So I think his knowledge and experience will help us to understand this topic and give insights on your behalf. I welcome him for the EduSet lecture. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amrendraji. Well, as Amrendraji has said, today's topic is rural dynamics in India, an analysis of a state initiative. The rural dynamics in post-colonial society largely depends on a state initiative. The role of a state cannot be minimized, particularly in colonial countries. So, keeping this in view, I have divided my lecture into two parts. The first part deals with a state initiative, and the second part deals with political empowerment. In political empowerment, in my next lecture, I would speak on Panchayati Raj institutions, particularly after 73rd constitutional amendment. Today, I am confining myself on rural dynamics that was caused by a state initiative. How the policies, roles, programs started by the state have affected rural life, how they have brought change in rural India, how far they have fulfilled the promises made to the people. So this is my main focus of today's lecture. When India got independence, independence movement was in the background, and independence movement took up the issue of development. Once India becomes independent, what would be the priorities of a state, how it would move, how it would solve the problem of poverty, unemployment, illiteracy. These were the burning topics even before independence, and many resolutions, All India Congress Committee, many resolutions, Karachi resolution, and many plans, 1938 National Planning Committee formed under Jawaharlal Nehru's chairmanship, then there was a Bombay plan. All these things were before independence. So there was a background understanding about development, how to develop a country that is predominantly rural, that is predominantly agrarian. When India got independence, there was a question. There was people, the leadership, national leadership, they had to decide whether they would follow capitalist path of development, socialist path of development, because these were the easily available models. It was a time the world was divided into two camps. One camp was led by America, the other was led by Soviet Union. The first followed capitalist path of development, the other second followed socialist path of development. So, and many of the newly independent countries, they followed either American bloc or Soviet Union bloc. There was a question mark before the leadership, which way to go. The Indian leadership of that time, they realized that after a long and sustained struggle, they have got independence. So if they follow any camp, either led by Soviet Union or led by America, then it may jeopardize their freedom, their newly achieved freedom. Freedom is very important. The importance of Swaraj, propounded by Gandhi and followed by all other nationalist leaders, that Swaraj was very important. And if India had decided to follow either of the camps, then it would have undermined the concept of Swaraj. It would have undermined the choices of India as a nation state. So India decided to follow an altogether different path. Nehru used to say that this is neither capitalist nor socialist. This is a third way. And third way, it was a way of mixed economy. Mixed economy, what is this mixed economy? Mixed economy includes the good points of both capitalist and socialist system. You know, India as a vision, as the underlying philosophical assumptions of India, the main thinking of Indian mind was not to create a kind of binary opposition. It always believed in evolving consensus, in making proper synthesis. And that background understanding, that tradition of bringing consciousness led to follow the concept of mixed economy. Mixed economy was not against market, not against democracy. In fact, it was a kind of deepening democracy. It was a kind of bringing democratic socialism in India. You know, if you absolutely tilt towards market, then it will undermine democracy. It will stop state from fulfilling people's desire, fulfilling their democratic rights. So there was a need to, on the one hand, to guarantee democratic rights, to assure people democratic participation, and on the other hand, to follow economic pragmatism, also give market its due role. So that was the thinking behind mixed economy, and that is why Nehru and the leadership of that time decided to allow both public sector and private sector to continue. Both can coexist. Public sectors will take up the development of heavy industries, would take up the development of infrastructure, whereas private sectors that would take into account consumer industries. So that is how the idea of development was envisaged at the time of independence. But before I delve deep into it, I just want to give you historical background of India's rural life, India's agrarian life. You know, in rural India, land is a primary source of livelihood. It has critical importance, you know, and this is the salient feature of all rural society. Land and possession of land, that determines one's social, economic, political position in a society. So without addressing the question of land, it is very difficult to ensure any kind of dynamism in rural India. Historically, you know, when India became the prey of colonialism, it fell into the hands of colonialism. There was a system, permanent settlement, started by Lord Cornwallis in 1973. And that land relation, it was a system of land revenue collection. Two important land system was started. One was Jamindari system, the other was Rayatwari system. In Eastern India, Jamindari system prevailed. And Jamindari system, it was a very exploitative system. You know, the Jamindars, they played a role of intermediary between the actual tiller and the state. And they collected revenue from the peasants, from the tiller, and deposited these revenues to colonial government. But the way they collected revenues from the tillers, from the peasants, it was that was very exploitative. They did not only collect revenues from the tillers, what they had to give to the British government, but they extracted surplus from the peasants, and this is the way they exploited. This was also the case in Rayatwari areas. Their riots were increasingly pauperized, their conditions worsened day in, day out. So the British colonialism started an exploitative land relation, land management, and revenue collection. This system continued up till 1947, and this exploitative system is responsible for creating a structure of exploiters, not only zamindars but also local money lenders. They also cropped up and exploited the poor peasants. So a kind of rural economy, a kind of exploitative rural economy was started with this new land revenue system, permanent settlement, started by Lord Cornwallis. So this was the background of rural India. This was the background of land relation, historical background of land relation in India existing before independence. So during freedom struggle, the Congress party promised the people of India that once India gets independence, zamindari system would be abolished. And true to their promise, the Nehru government abolished zamindari system. And as I said in the beginning, they adopted a model of planning, a model of planned development. Because democracy and bringing change in rural life is not possible without planning. It was being realized by the leadership that to make meaningful change in rural India, in rural life, there is a need of planning. Through planning, economic growth can be ensured, and that will help in alleviating poverty. That would help in alleviating, eradicating poverty, illiteracy, unemployment. That was the main purpose behind planning. And before independence, the leadership, the nationalist leadership, they realized the importance of planning. That is why National Planning Committee was formed in 1938 under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru. And since then, the importance of planning was realized. So Planning Commission was, with a government order, with a government resolution, it was formed. The first 5-year plan, it began in 1951. And the major thrust of the first 5-year plan was to bring change in the economic, social, political life of the people of rural India. And for achieving this multiple goal, Community Development Program was started, CDP. There was an expert group. They advised that unless, because agrarian society, rural society, it is a community-based society. So if you want to develop a rural life of the people, if you want to develop the life of rural people, then you have to envisage a program, a policy of community development. So Community Development Program was started by the post-independent Indian state. Then Nehru was also very much fond of equitable distribution, and that is why he was in favor of cooperative farming. You know, there was zamindari system, permanent settlement, it was extremely exploitative. So the government, the post-independent government, decided to ensure equal share in agricultural produce, the landless labor, small peasants, marginal peasants, they should have say in agricultural produce. So for that purpose, Nehru, he believed, he was in favor of starting cooperative farming. Though this idea was opposed by many other Congress leaders, but Nehru, he had a vision of creating a socialistic pattern of society, and the creation of socialistic pattern of society was not possible without making radical alteration in land relation. So this community development program, aiming at bringing economic, social, political and cultural change in the life of rural people, was started. Cooperative farming, though it was opposed, but even then it was experimented. After first 5-year plan, the second 5-year plan, it focused on land reforms. You know, I'm giving you the background because land is very important. Without addressing the issue of land, it is not possible to make any meaningful change in the life of rural people. So land reforms, that was the major concern before and after independence. And land reforms, three questions in second 5-year plan, 3 questions were addressed. The first was to abolish zamindari system, that was started by permanent settlement. The second was to bring tenancy reforms, and third was land ceiling. The first was zamindars, they were hated, and it was the promise of the nationalist leaders, so zamindari abolition was effected. The second was tenancy reforms. You know, tenancy reform was also very important. The lands, they were given to peasants, to tenants to cultivate, but they did not, the tenancy was mostly oral. They did not have tenure security, and the share of yield was also not equal. So the government brought tenancy reforms, that there will be tenurial security and the distribution of produce, agricultural produce between tenants and the owner. It would be 1/4 to the owner and rest to the tenants. So tenancy reforms, it was also that was brought. And the last, Land Ceiling Act. Land Ceiling Act, this was the surplus land. You know, many zamindars and many big landowners. It was decided that family would be the unit, and each family, wife, husband and dependent sons and daughters, they would form one unit, and every unit would be given a particular amount of land. After that, the surplus land, it would be distributed among landless laborers and small peasants. That was decided. But unfortunately, there was no uniform land reform policy, because land was a state subject, and many states, they could not ensure effective implementation of land reform measures. That is why still some states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, their land reforms measures, they are not as successful as in other states like West Bengal, Kerala, Maharashtra, Karnataka. So still the failure of land reforms in major states, that has caused serious disruption in the life of rural poor, and still there is a struggle, still there is a demand of land reforms in these states. Because of the failure of land reforms, there is emergence of Maoist movement in the beginning of Naxalite movement in late 60s, and that is still continued in these states. So this is in the beginning, the leadership, the post independent government wanted to bring institutional change. Through institutional change, they wanted to implement development and make meaningful change in the life of rural people. However, this stress on institutional change did not last long, because there was a rapid growth of population, and agricultural growth, it could not match the growth of population. The pace of population growth was much faster than the pace of agricultural growth, and that created a kind of starvation, poverty, famine. So there was shortage of food grains. How to cover up this shortage? How to ensure food to those who were starving? So this entailed the process of shifting from institutional change to technological change, technological approach to rural development. You know, the population was, in those years, 60s, population was increasing much faster, and the agricultural growth, agricultural production, it was not matching the growth of population. So the new ways were devised, and in these new ways, technological approach found very important place. Many experts, particularly from America, they came and they suggested to adopt sophisticated technology to bring change in the life of rural people. And this was, as I said, this was the background, that shortage of food grains, that led to the change in policies of the state, that shifted state attention from institutional change to technological change. And technological approach, the advice given by experts, that there is a need to ensure green revolution. And green revolution, it was not evenly ushered in. It was not started everywhere. Certain pockets were chosen where green revolution was supposed to be brought. What was that green revolution? Green revolution was started in those districts where there was proper facility of irrigation, where the situation was favorable for fertilizers, situation was favorable for high yielding varieties. So for that purpose, to choosing such districts, intensive agriculture district program, it was launched first in 55 districts. So this brought unexpected change. In wheat producing areas, there was bumper wheat crops. The rice cultivating areas, they are initially lagging behind, but later on they also increased their production. They also yielded more and more production, rice production. But so far as wheat is concerned, and wheat producing areas, those areas, the production of wheat increased year after year. The same pattern was followed by rice producing areas later on. So the green revolution, wherever it was implemented, wherever irrigation, high yielding varieties, tractor, thresher, all these agricultural implements were introduced, that brought increase in food production. But it was not without cost. It of course increased the food production. But this food production, that was concentrated in some pockets of India. That was not the development all over India. The green revolution brought benefits not for the entire India. It was for Punjab, Western UP, Maharashtra, Andhra, but not for entire India. So it created regional imbalance. It not only created regional imbalance, it also created a serious kind of inequality. So that was not good for rural India. On the one hand, you have an island of development, the living standard of those areas where Green Revolution brought change. That enhanced like anything. The standard of living, development, and all other development indices, they were quite remarkable. But in large areas of India, in large parts of India, the poor people, the small peasants, their life was as miserable as it was earlier. So there was discontent. If there is development for certain pockets and development and no development for larger areas of the country, then naturally it will create problem. So there was a need to make another shift. It was necessary to bring a green revolution to augment agriculture production. But this augmentation of agriculture production, it was uneven. That created serious problem for rural life. So in this background, and there was other political background also. What happened just after Green Revolution? Congress lost election in many states of North India in 1967. Fourth general election, Congress party lost for the first time after independence, lost in many states of India, and coalition governments, non-Congress coalition governments were formed. Even at the national level, Congress got majority, but it was a very simple and a small majority in parliament. Not only that, Congress party was also split up in 1969. So these were the factors, political factors, that also forced the government, central government, to bring change in policy to woo the rural population. Because in many parts of India, in many states of India, poor people, poor peasants, landless laborer, they were quite unhappy and expressing their discontentment. And not only that, this was a time when in 1969 there was a resurgence of Naxalites movement. It started in West Bengal, North Bengal, Siliguri, Naxalbari, and that is spread in many of backward states of India. 1969 government Home Ministry report, it accepts that because of underdevelopment of these areas, because of poverty, Naxal movements or Naxalites movement has started in these areas. That was the report of Home Ministry, Government of India, 1969. So it was accepted that the benefits of development did not reach each and everybody. The benefits of development were appropriated by a small number of people and a small regions of India. So in this situation, in such a scenario, there was a policy shift, how to ensure social justice to larger number of people in India. And for that, there was a shift, and this shift was target groups and area specific program. Now the government of India, it decided to ensure the development of small farmers, small peasants, the development of uplifting the life of marginal farmers and agricultural laborers. So they formed a small farmer development agency that was known as SFDA, and the other formation of marginal farmers and agricultural laborer, MFAL. They were formed, and many program and policies were started aiming at their development, bank loans and subsidized agriculture equipments and agriculture inputs to help them out. That was the initiative of the state, targeting these groups, the poor groups, those who are poor, both economically and socially. They were targeted, and a specific program and policies were made to uplift them, to rid them from the grip of poverty, from the grip of unemployment. And for that purpose, they were provided many facilities by the state. Not only that, there was also emphasis on employment generation. That small business and a small initiative taken by these groups, though they were supported by the state, they were supported by a state credit system. So this was a major policy shift, and this major policy shift was to avoid the concentration of benefits coming out of state policies. Concentration that should be more evenly distributed, and majority of people should benefit from the state initiatives. That will check discontentment, that will take care of rural unrest, because rural India was on the path of unrest. It was turmoil, especially after the emergence of Naxalite movements in late 60s. So to counter this, this target group approach, area-specific program was started. Not only that, there was also the Congress party under the leadership of Mrs. Gandhi. They started addressing the issues of the poor people. After 1969 split, the Congress government decided how to corner the votes of rural people. So they gave the slogan of Garibi Hatao. Unless you start program and policies helping the poor, a new emphasis was made on land reforms. A new emphasis was made how to distribute surplus land to Dalits, to landless poor. So this Garibi Hatao and all these things. So this was the whole new thrust of the state to bring changes in the life of rural poor, and that yielded in terms of electoral gains of Congress party. Congress party registered massive electoral victory. Mrs. Gandhi came to power after the split of Congress party in 1971 midterm poll. So this was the background, and this was how the political economy of that time forced the state to change its policies and programs, and direct its policies and programs to the upliftment of the poor, landless, Dalit, lower backward caste and minorities. So this brought some respite to the poor people, but it was without any structural change. That was merely by state initiative, and that was also for the purpose of gaining the support of these groups. But it could have lasted had there was some structural change. There was no structural change. Land reforms were not implemented. It was brought up to the notice of the people, but that was not effectively, that was not implemented. The failure of implementation remained as it is. The purpose was not to ensure long-lasting change in rural life, rural India, but to gain that these shifting policies, they were for the benefit of political class, for the benefit of the government of that time. But now a major shift, since the decade of 90s, we find major shift. and this shift coincides with major international event. With the collapse of Soviet Union, fall of Berlin Wall, and end of Cold War. That brought a change. That brought change not in one country, but that brought a global change. And that global change, was remarkable, or it was made remarkable by proclaiming that capitalism has triumphed over communism. There is a need to release human energy. There is a need to ensure human freedom. And a new development paradigm. It was a shift in development paradigm globally. And that shift was felt by each and every country of the world. In this paradigm shift, India also embarked upon a new policy, a new paradigm of development. That paradigm of development was different from Nehruvian paradigm. And that was the paradigm of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Initially, this unbridled libertarian policies, the government proclaimed that they are going to follow it. But Congress government at the time of election could not convince the people of the efficacy of such programs. So they lost election. And the next BJP government came to power after a short duration of non-BJP, non-Congress governments. It came to power and it followed the same policies. It also paid the price. It lost election in 2004. So after 2004, there was a new realization. It is not possible to bring unbridled liberalism. There is a need to negotiate with the people. There is a need to convince the people, poor people, those who are deprived, those who are facing denial. So unless they are convinced, it is not possible to embark upon a neoliberal agenda. So that was the basic thrust of a new change. And this new change was brought in the form of a right-based approach. Now the government, that was the time UPA government was formed. And that UPA government proclaimed that there is a need to develop a right-based approach to poverty eradication, to solving the crisis of food, to solving the problem of tribal ownership on forest produce, forest land. So this right-based approach, it started with the beginning of a right to information. It was emphasized, many activists, they emphasized that, everybody, every citizen has right to know how public money is being spent. And this brought them passing of legislation giving RTI reality. It was made act, and now this right to information, anybody can seek, anybody can by submitting 10 rupees, one can seek information from any department of the government, how much money has been spent, and what was the target, whether it has been achieved, whether it has not been achieved. And the official and department, they are legally bound to give that information. So this is a legal right of each and every citizen of the country. Secondly, there was a rural unemployment. The root cause of poverty is all pervasive unemployment in rural India. And to tackle the problem of rural unemployment, there is a need to start a long-lasting right-based employment program. It was there all, but it was not legal. It was not made an act. There was a rural employment scheme, but in 2006, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that time it was known as NREGA, in 2006, it was started by UPA government first as a pilot project in 150 districts of the country. And the logic behind it, that it is the legal right of each and every rural household to demand 100 days, minimum 100 days employment. And a state is duty bound to give 100 days, minimum 100 days employment to the people of rural India. Later on, this program, the name of this program was changed, and it has become Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, MGNREGA. This MGNREGA, under this act, Panchayat has been given a very important role. There to check corruption. Contractors, they do not have any role. Now the ward members of Panchayat, they would supervise the work, and elected representatives of Panchayat, they would be the disbursing authority, and money would be directly deposited in the name of the laborer, and that the laborer or the people guaranteed 100 days work, they would do unskilled work. There will be no use of machine, manual labor, and they would be given minimum wages declared by the state. Different states, they have different minimum wages. So minimum wages given to each and every household for 100 days. And what kind of work will be done, where it will be done, it will be decided by the general body meeting of village panchayat. So this MGNREGA, it has brought a kind of revolution in rural India, if I say so, because in some of the studies, they mention that it has stopped distress migration from rural India to urban centers, and it has positive impact in ensuring employment to rural poor. But at the same time, there are other studies, they say that they have also pointed out that large scale corruption has taken place in some states, in connivance with the government officials, in connivance with there is a nexus between elected panchayat representatives and block officials, and that nexus does not allow the benefits of MGNREGA to reach the rural poor. But despite all these shortcomings, this massive employment program, if it is implemented effectively, if there is a guarantee of implementation, it would bring very important change in the life of rural people, in the life of unemployed rural youth. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Though still there is a pessimism, there is a discontentment, because it is still in many places it has not ensured 100 days work. Some places 25 days, 30 days. In many of the places in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, hardly anybody has got 100 days work. And even then they have got only 30 days work. They have not been paid money for the entire period. They have been paid money for 15 days or 20 days, despite legal sanction. They have been denied their legal rights. So there are some difficulties, there are problems, corruption, loopholes. Even then, if these programs are implemented, if this program is implemented effectively, then it would bring change in the life of the life of the rural people. Again, there is a problem. There is a problem that a state initiative, it has important role to play, but this important role has obvious limitation in the absence of a structural change. If there is a nexus between social and political interest, socially entrenched classes and political institutions. If that nexus continues, if that nexus is not broken, then the possibility of benefits of MGNREGA would not reach the poor people, because the nexus it's into the larger fund of this MGNREGA. That creates problem. So there is a need to ensure a structural change, a structural reforms to make this program effective, to make this program bringing change in the life of rural poor. So there is a need of land reforms. Still there is a need to focus on land reforms. There is a need to break the nexus between social and political interest. Unless these are very important. This structural change, without bringing a structural change, no state initiative or no state policy can succeed in bringing change. Then again, the very important legislation passed by the Government of India to overcome the problem of starvation, to overcome the problem of hunger, and this is right to food security. Right to food security is one of the important legislations that was demanded by, because right to food security is not an ordinary right. It is related with right to life. Right to life is fundamental right. Unless there is a guarantee to livelihood, unless there is guarantee to life, what is the meaning of right to life? And in the absence of food security, if people are starving, then what kind of right to life they are enjoying? There is a serious violation of the serious violation of fundamental rights. To ensure fundamental rights, to ensure livelihood, the government has come up with right to food security. And this right to food security, it has been implemented in many tribal areas. They are getting rice, 2 rupees kg rice, 35 kg rice per family, and sugar, pulses, salt. But still, again, as I said, in case of MGNREGA, food security in some states like Chhattisgarh, it has really done wonder. Chhattisgarh, this PDS, public distribution system, it has done wonder. And many many reports and many studies, they have suggested that food security or the implementation of public distribution system is very efficient in Chhattisgarh. And possibly this is the region that Raman Singh government, it has been elected for third time consecutively. This government has been elected for third time because there is a efficient delivery system. Each and every poor tribals, they are getting assured amount of food grains, 35 kgs and 3 kgs gram, 2 kgs sugar, 3.5 liter kerosene, and 2 or 3 packets of salt free. But this is not the case in other states like Jharkhand. Jharkhand is another tribal state, but there this PDS, public distribution system, it is not as efficient as in Chhattisgarh. There they are hardly get 15 kg or 16 kgs. Many studies have suggested that in Jharkhand, it is also a tribal state, not more than 15, 16, at best 20 kgs of rice they have got. Nobody has got 35 kgs. Mandatory, it is mandatory. It has been made legally mandatory. But even then, this legal right has not been implemented at the ground level. The case of Bihar is worst. There are many of the households, studies and reports, field work, all these things have suggested that many of the households, except kerosene, they are not getting food grains, they are not getting sugar. Where all these sugar and food grains disappear, nobody knows. So, right to food security is again, it is not being implemented because of the nexus. Because of the nexus, between government officials and socially entrenched classes. So unless that nexus is broken, unless the social realm is democratized, there is a need of deepening democracy, and that deepening democracy can only take place if the nexus between social and political interest, if it is broken, if people, the affected people, the poor people, they are participating in the functioning of panchayat, it is not possible to guarantee public distribution system. Public distribution system, it has been guaranteed, but it is still, many people are demanding universal public distribution system. Earlier there was, before this paradigm shift, there was universal public distribution system. So now people are demanding that this is a partial public distribution system. There is a need. It only covers 70% population of the 70% population. So there is a need to implement universal public distribution system. This is a demand. There is also a demand, and this demand or this idea has been mooted by the government, that there is a need of direct cash transfer to bring change in the life of the people. So food security, like it has made some success in some places, but still many miles to go before it succeeds. Forest Act, now the government has also brought Forest Act to protect the dwellings of tribal people. Forest Act has protected them from the encroachment of contractors, timber merchant. So this act is also in right direction to address the problem of tribals, to address the problem of their rights over forest land, over forest produce. They have been living in forest areas for centuries. So that fact should be strengthened. That fact is strengthened with the implementation of Forest Act. Now the last but not the least, Land Acquisition Act. There is a protest all over India on the issue of formation of SEZ, special economic zones. We have examples of Nandigram, we have examples of Singur, we have examples of Western UP, where there is a strong protest against land acquisition by the government. To quell this kind of protest, to stop this kind of protest, Government of India has come up with Land Acquisition Act. And this Land Acquisition Act clearly underlines the fact that unless 80% of village panchayat agrees for land acquisition, land cannot be acquired. But the reality is that the government will acquire land for companies or for corporate sector only when 80% people agree. But for purpose of state, government doesn't need to take the consent of 80% people. Government can, for a state purpose, for the public interest, for in the name of eminent domain, a state can acquire land without seeking the consent of 80% people in village panchayat. So it is only in the case of corporate, if government acquires land to give it to corporate sector, then there is a mandatory requirement that it has to seek the acceptance of 80% people of village panchayat. So these are the programs, these are the state initiatives to bring change in rural life, in the life of rural poor. How far it has succeeded, it is still too early to make a definitive conclusion, but one can say that these initiatives are in right direction, but these directions can be strengthened if there is some or complementary structural change, if there is an attempt made by the state to break the nexus between social and political interest, then possibly these initiatives of the state would bring desired change in the life of rural people and ensure a democratic dynamism in rural life of the people of India. My next lecture would be on political empowerment, and my lecture will be focused on the functioning of Panchayati Raj institutions in India. Thank you.
So, well, friends, it was a quite explanatory lecture on the state initiative on this rural dynamics in India. So, I think you have got the point, and with this point, we conclude the lecture. And thank Dr. G. N. Trivedi for giving such a wonderful lecture. And I also thank all of you for watching the lecture. Thank you very much.